I would like to officially call this meeting to order and welcome everyone that is viewing or participating in this committee meeting today on the Assembly Committee on Legislative Operations and Elections. With that, Committee Secretary, will you please call roll?
Assemblywoman Dickman.
Here.
Assemblyman Frierson.
Here.
Assemblywoman Gonzalez.
Committee Secretary. I'm sorry, what was that, Committee Secretary? Okay. I apologize. I was hearing something else. Please continue with the roll.
Assemblywoman Gonzalez.
Here.
Assemblywoman Housekeeping.
Here.
Assemblyman Levitt.
Here.
Assemblyman Matthews.
Here.
Assemblyman MacArthur.
Here.
Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno.
Here.
Assemblywoman Thomas.
Here.
Assemblywoman Torres.
Here.
Chair Miller.
Here. Thank you for that. With that, just a few housekeeping items. Just want to remind everyone, as we do before every hearing, that if you wish to register online so that you can testify on a bill, that's available through the agenda that's posted on Nellis. Today, for our bill hearing, we will take up to 45 minutes of testimony for all three of our different positions, which would be 45 minutes in support, 45 minutes in opposition, and 45 minutes in neutral. Again, as you register, we ask that you don't share the link so that we can have an accurate recording of each individual that is participating. And of course, I will remind everyone once we get to that point that everyone has up to 2 minutes to for their testimony, as well as the reminder to always please state your name, your first and last name before each time you speak so that we can have an accurate record. And of course, at the end of the agenda, we also have up to 30 minutes of public comment. So with that, I will go ahead and move to our next agenda item, which is to open the hearing on Assembly Bill 321. Assembly Bill 321 is sponsored by Speaker Jason Frierson. It establishes procedures for the use of mail ballots in every election. With that, the hearing is open. So Speaker Frierson, we are ready when you are.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Jason Frierson, representing Assembly District 8. Thank you for your time today in consideration of Assembly Bill 321, which continues what we accomplished with Assembly Bill 4, passed during the 32nd special session. We've worked with county election officials and the Secretary of State's office to build upon the successes of AB4 and the primary mail election that the Secretary of State ran to develop a system that continues to expand the freedoms of Nevadans to vote. Briefly, AB 321 provides mail ballots in all elections while strengthening election processes and aligning other election-related deadlines and requirements. I realize that most of the focus today will likely be on the vote by mail provisions. I would like to provide the committee with some context and background on this topic in general. When, where, and how Americans vote has evolved over the course of the last 250 years. When the United States first came into being, voters would voice their choices on the courthouse steps out loud and very much not in secret. By the end of the 19th century, a paper ballot became common and it was increasingly cast in a private neighborhood polling place. Times are changing again. The majority of states now permit voters to cast ballots before Election Day, either in person at designated early voting sites or via the ballot that has been mailed to the voter's home. In all states, voting now takes place not just on one day during a fixed time period, but over a series of days and weeks before the election. In the last election, nearly half the nation voted by mail or absentee ballot. As you know, Nevada responded to the coronavirus pandemic and made sure that all active eligible voters received a ballot in the mail so they didn't have to choose between their health and their voice in the electoral process. Nevadans responded with record turnout, with nearly half of even our Nevada voters taking advantage of the opportunity to vote by mail or dropping off their ballot. I want to point out, my perspective with respect to elections, and I've been passionate about expanding access to democracy since I've been in the legislature. Before I was ever in elected office, I worked at the polls. I worked at the polls for Clark County elections for several years. And I saw firsthand how hard our poll workers work and how great our election officials are. And that goes from every county and our county election officials all the way up to our Secretary of State. I think that we are the best in the country and we've done a great job. And I saw it firsthand. And that certainly contributed to my thought process in this bill. But something else that contributed to my thought process in this bill is talking directly with the election officials that have to implement these. We didn't pull these provisions out of thin air. We talked with our election officials and asked them about their experiences on the front line. And they take pride in their work. They take pride in being the face of their office and serving the community. And this bill and some amendments conceptually that I'm going to discuss are a direct reflection, not only of conversations that we have with our election officials, with our Secretary of State's office, but also across the aisle. There's a misconception that there hasn't been any conversations with any of my Republican colleagues, and that's simply not the case. There are going to be some proposed amendments and even some provisions in the bill itself that are a direct reflection of conversations I've had across the aisle. I would also like to highlight some of the advantages of voting by mail. First, it increases voter confidence and satisfaction. Citizens can review their ballots at home, take all the time they need to study the issues. Voters often express enthusiasm for this option. I've heard many voters across the state, including some colleagues in this body, who express how much they enjoyed filling out their ballot at home and returning it by mail or at a ballot drop box. In addition, reports indicate that because of convenience, voter turnout increases. In 2013, there's a report on all mail ballot elections in Washington and a 2018 report on all mail ballot elections in Utah, both of which reflected increased voter turnout based on that being an option. I do understand the concerns of those who wish to engage in the civic tradition of voting with neighbors at traditional polling places. But AB 321 actually continues to provide that option. It doesn't take away your ability to vote in person. It maintains that right and that option as well as other options. And again, freedoms that Nevadans have come to value dearly. If a voter knows that they want to vote in person and they didn't receive a ballot in the mail, they can simply opt out of receiving a ballot in the mail if that's what they want to do. These are, again, freedoms that Nevadans have come to cherish. So I'll now go through the sections of the bill and also go through some conceptual amendments that are the reflection of, again, those conversations that I've had with the folks that have to implement this on the front line. But I'd like to go over the major sections of the bill. Sections 2 through 17 and sections 51 through 63 remove existing law concerning ballots for absentee voters, mailing precincts, mail ballots, and replace them with new provisions that require county and city clerks to send each active registered voter a mail ballot for all elections. The existing processes for preparing and distributing the ballots are essentially maintained with a few changes. In a similar manner, the processes are maintained with a few changes for voting as well as for the return, verification, and counting of mail ballots. I'd like to highlight sections 3 and 51 because that is a new provision that I thought was extremely important given concerns after last election and what we had to do with Assembly Bill 4, and that is the opt-out provisions that I mentioned. Sections 3 and 51 provide an opt-out provision for active voters who prefer to not use the mail ballot option. As I mentioned earlier, if voters do not want to receive a ballot by mail, they can simply opt out. Sections 8 and 56 alter the deadlines for city and county clerks to receive a ballot, reducing it from what was 7 days following the election to 4 days. This is the epitome of compromise. Folks were concerned about delays, and so we spoke with our clerks. We recognized that most of the ballots were received within that time frame, so we agreed to reduce it from 7 to 4 days. Sections 12 and 60 require the appointment of a bipartisan county board. And pursuant to section 13 and 61, the board must complete the counts of all mail ballots on or before the 7th day following the election. Manual or electronic verification is authorized in sections 11 and 59, and procedures are set forth for the process of using electronic verification machines. The deadline by which a voter can either provide or confirm a missing or questionable signature is reduced from the current 9 days to the 6th day following the election. Again, finding middle ground and trying to expedite the closure of elections. And in addition, section 17 and 65 establish standards for testing the accuracy of these signature verification devices prior to an election with daily audits as the ballots are processed. Audit reports are produced, and section 34 and 80 require the reports to be collected and maintained by local election officials. Under section 16 and 64, every year, each county and city clerk and their election staff required to complete a class on forensic signature verification. That's every year. So again, we are trying to increase accountability. We're making sure that our election officials are trained in the most recent technology and practices so that our elections continue to be safe and secure. Our confidential information statutes originally were enacted to protect the privacy and ensure the safety of certain persons involved in our legal and judicial system at their request. Sections 46, 87, 88, and 89 extend those protections to county clerks, city clerks, and certain registrars of voters, and any deputy in a city or county election division. These confidentiality sections apply to information that's available in public records that are kept by city or county clerks, county recorders, county assessors, and the Secretary of State. Such information can include a person's home address or that of his or her immediate family, his or her telephone number, and even his or her email address. Upon request, this information can be kept confidential for those individuals. In addition, these individuals could request that their driver's license or state identification card contain a substitute address to use in place of their physical address. Section 25 clarifies the motor voter statutes by specifying that a voter who has been registered to vote by the Department of Motor Vehicles and who's produced the required documents at that time will not be required to show proof of identity or residency when voting for the first time in a federal election. Sections 26, 28, 70, and 74 extend the deadlines for requesting polling places at Indian reservations or Indian colonies. The revised dates are April 1st for the primary election and September 1st for the general election. And this is again designed to give more time to provide options for those that are on reservations or Indian colonies. Finally, in order to maintain an accurate voter registration list, the Secretary of State and the State Registrar of Vital Statistics are required under Section 44 to enter into a cooperative agreement to do monthly comparisons of statewide voter registration lists with records concerning the deaths of residents. This was, again, another important measure to increase the ability to clean voter rolls by requiring that they do it on a regular basis, monthly. There are some proposed amendments, and again, in discussing this bill with our incredible county clerks and registrars, as well as the Secretary of State's office, I have put together a conceptual amendment for the bill that incorporates their input. This amendment was provided to you earlier today, I hope. It should have been provided to you earlier today, and I'll summarize a few of the larger changes here. We added a minimum number of polling locations to make sure that we don't see lines that are hours long during early vote or election day. Of course, this isn't Costco. Voting is a right, not a privilege. And waiting in line for 7 hours is just simply unacceptable when it comes to such a valuable constitutional right. We also want to make sure that ballot drop boxes are available at every early vote and election day polling location. Thousands of Nevadans dropped off their ballot at a drop box, myself and many of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle included. Voters can skip the lines and drop off their ballot at in a convenient and secure way. I've heard from many constituents about how much they enjoyed dropping off their ballots at a drop box, how easy it was, how convenient it was. And again, they were able to avoid having to wait in long lines and simply drop off their ballots. Allow for online voter registration between the final Thursday of early vote and election day. The reason that this was important, and this was again a reflection of input from our election officials. Previously, there was a break in voter registration during this period of time, and the clerks and registrars at that time deemed it necessary for them to gear up and get ready. But going through this experience, last year, the clerks and registrars have deemed that break to be unnecessary. This further expands the opportunity for eligible Nevadans who want to take part in the election process to make their voices heard, even if they wait until the last minute to make a decision on whether or not they're going to participate. We set a deadline for voters to opt out of automatically receiving a ballot in the mail to 60 days before Election Day. Again, if a voter doesn't want to receive a ballot in the mail, it's no problem. They simply can opt out and vote in person at an early vote site or on Election Day. And the 60-day time period gives our election officials adequate time to process that and make sure that they don't send someone a ballot in the mail who doesn't want it. Align signature verification requirements between mail-in ballots and in-person voting pursuant to NRS 293.285. This is already the practice our clerks and our registrars use, and including it here simply provides more transparency and how the system already works. We wouldn't want a situation where down the road we start to deviate from that practice, so we put it in statute as what we believe and what our election officials believe are best practices. Also, all other changes included in the conceptual amendment came from discussions with our county clerks and our registrars to streamline the process and make sure they are able to deliver an efficient election process to Nevada voters. There's some other, again, technical aspects of it that were a reflection of our conversation with our local election officials, but I also have available a few folks that can answer any technical questions. That's Sam Oliker-Friedland, a former trial attorney with the Department of Justice Voting Rights Division, and currently the Chief Legal Counsel to the Center for Secure and Modern Elections, Joe Gloria with the Clark County Registrar of Voters, and Mark Lashin with the Secretary of State's office. I'd like to close on a personal note, and I have to say that I enjoyed the experience of sitting at my kitchen table and taking time to mark my mail-in ballot, and I've heard that I'm not alone in that feeling. My kids saw me voting, and even though there are more years before they'll be old enough to vote, I know they'll remember seeing my wife and I take time to vote. The changes made to AB 321 incorporate a proven system that is convenient for voters, that's run by dedicated state and local election officials who I know are the best in the country. I'm excited to make these changes and that will continue to allow voters the freedom to choose how they want to vote in Nevada. Again, this is not Costco. Voting is a right, not a privilege, and we should make it as convenient and equitable for eligible Nevadans as possible. As I have said repeatedly, I believe the late John Lewis did, that the vote is the most powerful nonviolent tool that we have in a democracy. I'm proud that Nevada has led the way over the years to expand the ways in which people vote, and I'm proud to continue expanding our freedoms with AB 321, which reflect an expansion in Nevada, but not a new concept, with several states having had seamless and very, very successful election processes via mail, including some states to do only mail elections. So Madam Chair, members of the committee, that includes my presentation of the bill itself. I did want to address, in addition to the provisions of the bill and the provisions of the conceptual amendment, some concerns that some of my colleagues have expressed. There was a letter that was circulated that expressed some initial issues with the language in Assembly Bill 321. I will note, no one ever sent me this letter. No one ever came to me and said, these are issues that concern us. These are things that if addressed, we could get on board. No one ever said that. It was just put out there in the universe, but I want to address them because I think they are important and worthwhile of discussion. The first issue acknowledges that there was a proposal that was incorporated into the bill that the Secretary of State needs to coordinate with the Bureau of Vital Statistics to note death monthly. Again, that is a reflection of me recognizing that my colleagues across the aisle included this in one of their proposed pieces of legislation, and I agreed wholeheartedly, so I incorporated it into this bill. The concern was including a mandated removal process from the rolls to fix the problem. Again, I will point out that the language was lifted expressly from a bill from a Republican colleague of mine that had an interest in addressing this. And so if it wasn't in that language, then I struggle to see why it would be here. Not to mention the whole purpose of the Secretary of State coordinating with the Bureau of Vital Statistics is so they could have a removal process. That's the whole point of them coordinating. And I was proud to take that idea and put it in this bill. The second item was the concern in section 9.1 on what we refer to as ballot assistance, being able to transport somebody's ballot to a drop box. I will point out that even with respect to this, we made it a category B felony to violate this provision and not turn in that ballot in less than 3 days. And so, I do believe that was at least to some degree addressed. Section 12, the concern was establishing a mail ballot counting board that are exclusively appointed by the clerk or registrar, but does not mandate a party split or ratio. It only says that they can't be the same political party. I think that it's clear our intention is to make sure that we have a diverse and broad array of folks that are in these positions. So has someone contacted me, this was not a problem, and certainly I will be open to addressing. Section 17.2 was a concern there about the election board officers reviewing electronic signatures being appointed. Oh, I'm sorry, that's the same issue. But again, I don't take issue with the diversity of the folks that will make up this board. Section 8.1 allows mail-in ballots to be counted. It says turned in, but counted up to 4 days after the election. Again, I'll point out the very nature of compromise is middle ground. In AB4, it was 7 days. We agreed to reduce that down to 4 days to address the concern to some extent and expedite the ability to get closure in the elections. Section 7.1 was a concern about ballots being allowed to be completed by other persons. Now, this section is for disabled folks that have difficulty with their vision or otherwise disabled. And there's a concern about, although this is to help people who can't read or write, there's no description of how clerks and registrars must maintain these records for these assisted ballots. Again, never brought up to me before, and certainly something that I will be willing to take a look at and address in consultation with our election officials, who may very well already do this, but we didn't have the benefit of having this in advance to vet that or explore that issue. Section 27.4, if a signature does not match, the poll workers are not allowed to ask a voter for their birthday. Actually, I think it says section 27.9. It's actually section 27.4. And it asks why not. We actually addressed that in the amendment, in the proposed amendment, in consultation with our registrars that actually is returned. So they are allowed to ask that if someone is in person and their signature doesn't match. And lastly, section 34.5, and I felt compelled to address this because I think that it's important that Nevadans hear the truth. And that is there was a concern that section 34.5 eliminates election contests. And it reflects that no one can review voted ballots and records of machines unless a judge orders it and both parties agree. And the question is, why would the winner agree? This has been Nevada law since 1981 and was not addressed at all in Assembly Bill 4 from last special session, nor in Assembly Bill 321. As far back as 1981, the language in statute reflects that the actual ballots cannot be reviewed. And that's been the law. So Assembly Bill 321 didn't change that. Assembly Bill 4 didn't change that. That has been the law in some way, shape, or form since 1981. Between 1981 and today, rather than it reference just ballots, because in 1981, we didn't have the machines that we have now. Over the years, language has been added to take into account the machines and the paper rolls in the machines. But that was already existing Nevada policy. So I just think that Nevadans deserve to know the truth, and that AB 321 didn't have anything to do with that language whatsoever. That was already existing law. And so with that, Madam Chair, again, I have some folks that I believe could contribute at least answering questions, not having their own presentations, but answering questions of a technical nature to the extent that members have questions. And I would welcome that dialogue at this time.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Mr. Speaker. I think what we'll go ahead and do is members, Please address your questions directly to Speaker Frierson, and then he will determine if it's a question that he's choosing to respond to himself or to call in some of his support to respond to those technical aspects, okay? With that, I know that we do have a number of questions, and I always go in the order that they come to me, except for I will make one exception this time because we have a member who is leaving to present a bill in another committee, and we all experience that and understand what that's like, and I don't want a member to miss that opportunity. So after this, we'll go in the order that they came, but first I'd like to make that exception for Assemblywoman Dickman.
Thank you so much, Chair Miller. I really appreciate it. And thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I've had countless constituents that have reached out to me since the election, expressing their distrust and uneasiness with the process of the 2020 election. In fact, many have said that they're not going to vote again. Do you believe the provisions of this bill would restore the confidence that our constituents have since lost in our elections?
Thank you again, Madam Chair. May I go directly to members?
Yes, please.
Thank you, and Assemblywoman Dickman, thank you for that question. And I really appreciate it being the first question, because as much as many voters may disagree, concerns about election security are real and should be taken seriously. No one should disregard it, and I don't. The reason that I was agreeable to making the changes from Assembly Bill 4 to Assembly Bill 321 was for that very reason. We were making sure that training was incorporated and required by an expert, a forensic expert. We incorporated that the machines would be audited. We incorporated shorter amounts of time. I also think that of course, many states are going through some exercises in what their voting experience is going to be like. But I think what's important is that we talk about the truth, that we rely on our election officials to tell the truth. And when our election officials say, for example, there was no systemic fraud, I think regardless of what people are saying on the news, in the media, when the people who are on the front line in both parties are saying that there was not systemic fraud, I think we can only continue to hear from voters, to address their concerns best we can while maintaining access to the polls and relying on our election officials, who I believe are the best in the country. And they have confirmed that there was no systemic fraud. I think that there's also a movement to recognize that there's inherent danger with voting machines as well. And so we have options. If you don't trust the voting machines, then you can have your old-fashioned paper ballot. You can go drop it off in a mailbox, in a mailbox, or at a drop box, or directly with a person. So I say all of that to say I do believe that these are measures that will make progress towards restoring that confidence. I also think that we need to continue to educate the public, to point out the facts and point out what's misleading about what's being narrated across the country. I will say this, and I believe that our Secretary of State's office and all of our election officials are interested in a top-down election system. I also agree. I am very interested and committed to finding a way to fund a top-down election system, as you heard from our Secretary of State's office, so that we are unified. We have a system that's in place that's ideal and a model that all of our election officials have advocated for. And I'm very committed to make sure that happens as well.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Madam Chair, could I just a quick follow-up?
Sure.
Thank you. This is a little more maybe technical, but some of those constituents that I've heard from told me stories of having gone to the polls to vote, and they were asked for their ballot to turn in, and they never got a ballot, and so they were only allowed to cast a provisional ballot, as we know. So I'm wondering if there's anything in this bill that would address that and make sure that the correct ballot is actually counted.
Well, and I'll say this, I really would prefer that maybe Mr. Gloria answer that question, but they would only be required, my understanding is to cast a provisional ballot if they were not registered previously. If you show up and you're a registered voter on election day, you should be able to vote. But again, to the extent that Mr. Gloria or Mr. Velasquez can answer that question, I would welcome it.
Mr. Speaker, that actually happened to me in the primary. I went to vote and I didn't bring my ballot with me, so they were going to make me cast a provisional ballot. I knew better and, made my case, and they let me vote a regular ballot. But so
again, I would ask Mr. Gloria to address that, because it sounds to me like that was a personnel and an individual issue, not one that was just how the system was designed to work. But again, I would defer to our election official for that.
Thank you.
For the record, Joe Gloria, am I audible? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. And
Thank
please
you.
go direct.
Joe Gloria, a registrar of voters in Clark County. Assemblywoman Dickman, in Clark County, the only reason that somebody would have been provided a provisional ballot when they showed up in person would be if they had participated in same-day registration or an update or even online registration once it entered into the same-day registration period. Not surrendering a ballot or not having a ballot to surrender would not have forced you to vote a provisional ballot in Clark County, and shouldn't have anywhere in the state. Maybe Mark would like to add to that.
But this was a person who was told you already voted.
Assemblywoman, let's make sure that our questions stay concise and we wait for the response. And so again, we're asking on a technical point, and he had deferred it to Mr. Velasquez. So let's hear from Mr. Velasquez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mark Velasquez, Deputy Secretary of State for Elections, for the record. Mr. Gloria answered the question. The only other thing I would like to add to that, though, is again, the system, the technical system that we have set up and that we've used in the state for some time now, even if you do have an absent ballot provided to an individual, if you show up to the polls in person and vote in person, like Mr. Gloria stated a minute ago, that absent ballot that you maybe left at home or didn't have or couldn't find, or maybe there was a question about your address, it's automatically canceled. The barcode on it is canceled so that nobody can vote that ballot. I think that's an important thing to be mindful of as well. Does that answer your question, Assemblywoman Dickman?
Actually, no. This is someone who went to vote and they were told you already voted. We have a mail ballot that you have voted, and only this person had not voted. So can you address that scenario?
Again, Joe Gloria, Registrar of Voters in Clark County. Assemblywoman Dickman, if they had come to the polls and gone through the kiosk system for us to look them up, in the system, it indicates when we've read a mail ballot for the individual. In fact, if we had looked into the record and seen that we had a mail ballot for that individual, we would not have allowed him to vote in person. So they wouldn't have even been given the opportunity to vote provisionally. At that point, they would have needed to contact our office, and we could have looked into it further based on that specific situation. However, in the normal course of voting, had they been coming in person to sign in to vote, they would not have been allowed to go through and vote, not even provisionally, if our system had indicated to us that we had already received a mail ballot. Those are part of the checks that are put into place to ensure that the integrity of the process is maintained and that we're not allowing people to vote twice in the same way.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Thank you, Assemblywoman.
Appreciate the jump the line.
You're welcome. We will move on to our next, that comes from Vice Chair Housekeeping.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Speaker Frierson. I had a couple of questions, and I just wanted to start with the opt-out provisions. I know in the bill it talks about how each county clerk will set their own provisions when it comes to opting out, but that's already for registered voters. Is there going to be one too for automatic voter registration?
Again, I would defer to Jason Price for the record. I would defer to Mr. Velasquez or Mr. Gloria on the technical aspects of that. I will say this: I thought of this provision in response to the voters that said, "I don't want my ballot in the mail." And I asked our election officials how difficult would it be to allow an opt-out provision. And not only did our election officials indicate that they could, but that it will ultimately, result in some savings, because if you don't want it in the mail and you're not going to take advantage of that process, how easy is it to opt out? Again, we amended it to add 60-day window so that there's enough time to take that into consideration. But again, I'll defer to either Mr. Velazquez or Mr. Gloria on the technical aspects of how that will be accomplished.
For the record, Joe Gloria, Registrar of Voters, Clark County. Assemblywoman Hadagi, in relation to your question for opting out, the sponsor did work directly with us, and we had a lot of communication. There's no doubt that we can mark any voter who chooses not to receive that ballot in the system. We currently mark when people are looking to have a permanent absentee ballot. So there's no reason to believe that we wouldn't be able to do just the opposite of that. They worked with us in setting that deadline, and the reason it's 60 days is because that's when we send our first file to the printer. So if you don't want a ballot, then that deadline has to coincide with when we start sending information. I do have a question for you in relation to AVR. I'm not understanding exactly what you're asking about as far as opting out of the AVR process.
Oh, no, that actually, you completely answered my question. Because I was trying to just get clarification as to when somebody would opt out, but they would opt out within that period. So it would be on like every election cycle, they would just do that little opt out. And then it's not something they could do permanently if someone's just turning 18 and they register. I was just trying to figure out when that opt out would be, but it answered my question. Okay. I do have one more question because I want to make sure we have this on the record, but polling locations aren't going to change, right? Like people are still going to have their same traditional polling locations. This mail-in provision isn't going to change anything. So if someone does want to go, they can feel comfortable knowing that their traditional polling locations are still going to exist and be there.
If I can, for the record, Jason Frierson, I will say this: we put in AB4 a minimum number of polling locations to make sure that we have adequate locations. Because prior to that, again, folks had limited places that they can go and they were waiting in line for hours on end. In consultation with our election officials and their request to be given flexibility, we did decrease the minimum number of polling locations per county based on input from our registrars and, quite frankly, their request, understandably, to have some flexibility. And they could do more, but we wanted to give our election officials some flexibility to take into account. We don't know what the next election process is going to look like. There may very well be a lot of people who are still uncomfortable going to a polling place, and there may be folks that can't wait now that our numbers for COVID are down. And so we thought it was worthwhile to take that request and provide those elected officials with the flexibility they needed to react to that kind of voter turnout. But the minimum numbers are significant, and so it still allows for I believe Clark was 100. Look at it. Clark 100 locations, Washoe 25 locations, all others 1 for general election and for early vote. Clark 25, Washoe 15, and all others 1.
Thank you, Speaker. And Madam Chair, if I could just follow up, please.
Certainly, Vice Chair.
Thank you. And then this is just a technical question. I just want to make sure I'm reading it right. Section 4 sub 2 says, in sending a mail ballot to an active registered voter, the county clerk shall use an envelope that may not be forwarded to an address of the voter that is different from the address to which the mail ballot is mailed. And again, just clarification, that just wants to, that just says like, if I set up a mail forward to have all my mail go to my PO box, then that will skip that. That will still come to my house, right? Like, I'm reading that correctly?
That's my reading as well. Again, I would defer to election officials if I'm inaccurate in that regard.
For the record, Joe Gloria, Registrar of Voters, Clark County. Assemblywoman Hadagi, that's exactly what would happen. The Postal Service would not forward that mail to a forwardable address. That does not happen.
Okay, perfect. And I think this is great. And I just want to say, because my household is a perfect example of how this works for everyone. During this last election, I voted from my couch and filled out my ballot. And then we drove to the polling location and I got to walk in and drop off my ballot and my husband got to stand in line. So we both got to vote exactly how we wanted to, which I thought was great. So thank you. And Madam Chair, if there is time later, I would like a couple more questions if there's time. Thank you.
Certainly, Vice Chair. With that, we will move on to the next question, which is from Assemblyman Levitt.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and just like to thank the bill sponsor for addressing some of the concerns that that some constituents had with the process. My question is more in regards to the bill would permanently legalize the practice commonly known as ballot harvesting, and which provisions made that illegal and probably for a good reason in the past. So based on your experience, what groups tend to participate in ballot harvesting? My understanding is that they tend to be people from, state parties, party activists, consultants. Is that your experience, or do you have some other insights on that?
Well, again, Jason Friesen, for the record, I would again defer to our election officials with their experience. But first of all, I think ballot harvesting is a misnomer. And I think when you're talking about ballot assistance, when you're talking about telling someone that, hey, Assemblyman Levitt, I'm going to drop off my ballot. You're busy right now. Let me drop off yours too. That I can, because there are signature verification procedures in place with a sealed envelope for that to be able to happen securely. That's, I guess the misnomer to me is when you call it harvesting, you are making up or growing a ballot, and that's just not I think an accurate description of what it is. But in answering your question, it was not illegal. It did not exist. It was not addressed at all in Nevada statute before '84. So that's my understanding anyway. Again, our elected officials can correct me if they're wrong, and they can certainly answer questions about the characteristics of the folks, if there is a generalization of the folks that took advantage of it. I am aware that there were some political organizations that actively took advantage of ballot assistance, and quite frankly, my recollection was that it was actually the Republican Party, at least in Clark County, that really aggressively took advantage of at least on social media, encouraging folks to participate in that regard. And I will say this, for folks that think that there's really some partisan motive, we had a supermajority before last election, and we advanced Assembly Bill 4 and lost that supermajority. It didn't make it the wrong thing to do, though, because it increased participation and access to the polls, which is what ultimately the purpose was and the intent was, regardless of who had benefited. But again, with respect to with respect to the if there is a generalization of the kind of people that took advantage of it, I don't know if there's a way that either Secretary of State's office or the registrar would really be able to know that. But to the extent that they do, I would certainly defer to them.
Thank you, Speaker. Mark Washington, Deputy Secretary of State for Elections, for the record. Specifically in regards to the organizations that attempted ballot harvesting over this last election, there really wasn't a trend. Quite frankly, there was a number of organizations that reached out and were attempting to assist their fellow voters in getting ballots collected and brought to the clerk's offices appropriately. All of them that we found out about and talked to, we helped make sure that they were in compliance with the new law. It was actually previously a felony to collect, to harvest ballots if it was outside of your individual family. And I can provide some of the wording, but again, that was prior to AB 4. It was a crime. And now, of course, it's allowed though. But again, in regards to specific organizations, one side or the other, not the case. Certainly nothing that we were absolutely keeping our eyes open, looking for that sort of that issue. But there were a number of organizations, even some that were not politically related, that were out trying to assist other voters in that effort.
For the record, a registrar of voters, I could just add to that, we work closely with the Secretary of State in discussions on reports that we were getting from various groups who were trying to help voters ballots. I think a lot of it has to do with voter education. As mail ballots become more prevalent with the passage of the bill, if it passes, it's important that voters know and we communicate when speaking over the phone. It's your ballot. Be responsible, make good decisions about who you're giving the option to turn that ballot in for you. And always remember, although there was a lot of information out there that led to mistrust of the U.S. postal system, it was postage paid return on all of those envelopes. So you can always put that in the mail as well for it to get back. But we overserved in providing mail ballot drop-offs at all locations for early voting and election day. Again, with education to voters. Once they see that it's just as easy for them to drive up, drop off their ballot as it used to be for them to stop and vote in person, I think that you'll see a larger increase in the number of ballots that came in through the drop-off box. But the majority of ballots that came in were through the drop-off box.
Thank you, and I just want to thank Mr. Velasquez for clarifying. I believe violations of NRS 293 were all Category E felonies. My point was we didn't have the mail-in process that AB4 created and AB 321 continued. We did have absentee ballots, but all violations of NRS 293 in the form that it existed before and continuing were a Category E felony, and we make sure that it's continuing in this language to be a Category E felony with respect to these provisions as well.
Thank you for that. Just to follow up on what Mr. Voloshin had stated, so why not continue with the practice of, a family member or legal guardian being the one that actually handles the ballot and delivers it? Why the change?
Well, again, for the record, Jason Frierson, I, with all due respect, I don't think that's a question for Mr. Velasquez, who didn't write the bill. He's carrying out the provisions that we passed. Today is the hearing, and we've been talking about these provisions since last special session, and no one has raised that concern or issue or indicated that would resolve their concerns before today. I am absolutely willing, as I always have been in the legislature, to work across the aisle, hear concerns, find middle ground where we can. And so in this regard, I would be just as receptive.
Thank you so much, Speaker. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Assemblyman. Our next question is from Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As I believe many, if not all of my colleagues, have been receiving a lot of calls and a lot of emails about this piece of legislation. And oftentimes when people reach out, sometimes they have received misinformation. So if I can, Mr. Speaker, can I just ask you some questions just to clarify things so people get the right information?
Sure, to the extent I can, and I have a experienced folks that can back me up or clarify if I can.
Thank you. So the first thing, is there anything in Assembly Bill 321 that would create one single legislative body?
Absolutely not.
Thank you. The next, is there anything in this legislation as it's written and with the amendment that would allow someone who is not registered to vote in the state of Nevada to actually cast a ballot?
No, there's nothing in Assembly Bill 321 that advances that or permits that any different than the existing state of law. There are people with ill intent that violate the law, and it's like the movie Minority Report. We can't predict that. But Assembly Bill 321 does absolutely nothing to advance that.
And then my final question, because it's been in a number of emails that I've received, is there anything in this legislation that would grant the rights of someone who is not a citizen of the United States, naturalized or not, the right to vote?
There's nothing in Assembly Bill 321 that would advance a non-citizen's ability to vote any different than existing law. There are requirements for voter registration and qualifications, and Assembly Bill 321 incorporates those processes just like existing law does, just the same.
Thank you so much. I had responded to some of them, asking them to let me know exactly where in the bill that they felt this information came from. I did not receive any answers, and I thank you so much for putting that on the record. So that it's my hope that they're listening and their questions have been answered. Thank you so much for the legislation, and thank you, Madam Chair, for allowing me the questions.
Thank you, Assemblywoman, and if I may, I think Mr. Gloria pointed out as well, it's all about voter education and making sure that we are providing accurate information so that folks know the truth. And so I take it serious when folks hear this from outside of Nevada or through social media or national media, that it's important that we continue to work hard to educate voters on what the truth is. And there's nothing about those points that you asked that are embraced or advanced by Assembly Bill 321.
Thank you so much for saying that. I believe as elected officials, we have a responsibility to make sure that the information that's given is correct. And when we're the ones that's carrying out misinformation, that truly is a disservice to the constituents that we're supposed to represent. So thank you.
Thank you, Assembly. Next, our question will come from Assemblyman Matthews.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for the bill presentation. A few questions. Section 17.2 says that the election board officers to review electronic signatures are appointed by the clerk, and they can't be of the same political party. But this does not mandate a party split or ratio. It simply says they can't be of the same party. So presumably under that, a Democrat and an independent, or a Republican, a member of the Independent American Party, that would satisfy the requirement. So I want to make sure, number one, that's correct. I don't see that addressed or changed specifically by the amendment, but maybe I missed it in your remarks. Did you say in your remarks that you intend to further amend the bill to address that? Because I think the concern here would be the lack of balance and potential oversight and transparency in the process. Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblyman Matthews. I did address it in my opening remarks, and that was that no one's approached me about that before now. I think the existing law or the existing practice already incorporated the ability for the clerks to appoint folks to the board that are not of the same party. And I think it's pretty clear that the intent is to be balanced and for there to be a representation of the actual constituency. As I stated in the opening, had somebody provided some proposed legislation to require that it be reflective of a ratio, that wouldn't have been a problem at all or a concern at all. And I quite frankly believe that our elected officials probably already do that. And so I don't want to speak for them or how many members they're talking about, but I do believe that the practice was already to incorporate that, and to the extent that that needs to be stated, wouldn't offend me at all.
Thank you. Another question for you, Mr. Speaker. We in Nevada, we have no excuse absentee voting in this state. And I know there are a number of bills actually moving during the current session that would further enhance access to those opportunities. I support those efforts because, the absentee balloting process, that comes with strong measures to ensure security. So my question would be, why do we need universal mail-in voting when we have in place a strong and effective process for voting absentee for those who want to do so? Thank you.
Thank you again, Assemblyman Matthews. I have a simple answer, and that is a record voter turnout. Whatever we had prior to AB4 did not stand up to AB4 and the results of the election. And so when we're talking about a constitutional right, clearly something happened where we had a record turnout, and nearly 50% of that was through mail and drop-off voting. So we went from absentee voting turnouts of 10% to 48%. I think that is indicative of an interest in moving in this direction and providing this additional option. I think that there are many people that, and in this last election was especially relevant when you had so many judicial options and a lot of folks that either weren't going to vote or didn't decide exactly how they were going to vote until the last minute. And I think drop-off gave them an option that was reflected in the increased turnout. So I would simply point to the turnout of the folks that use mail-in ballots versus absentee ballots prior as an indication of an interest in the electorate to have this as an option.
Thank you. And if I may, I wanted to ask you about the opt-out clause, which I know you referenced a lot. Opt-out clauses, by their nature, of course, put the burden on the consumer, in this case, the voter, to opt out rather than on the distributing entity. I think that's one of the reasons why so many people out in the real world have such a distaste for that approach with the opt-out clause. But that aside, the most common problem I heard in talking with voters in the last election, and I talked with very many of them, was the issue of ballots showing up at their homes intended for people who did not live there and people they had never heard of. And I see no reason to think that an opt-out clause for somebody to opt out of getting their own ballot at their home would do anything at all to remedy that problem. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think it would. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Assemblyman Matthews. And I'll start with the last question. With respect to ballots coming to your home that are not, residents of that home, clearly that has nothing to do with opt-out. And I think that's on its face a separate question. But again, these are the reasons why we included provisions that have the Secretary of State and Vital Statistics cleaning the rolls more frequently. I believe that as we continue to modernize our election system, I think that we will continue to see less and less of that. But at the end of the day, unless you are a signature expert and can figure out somebody else's signature who you don't even know, even if it were turned in, it will be invalidated as not matching. And so this is why the bill also incorporates mandatory forensic training so that our election officials are trained annually on being able to identify those and having that election board that is bipartisan or not composed of one party to look at it and agree on signatures that don't match. So I think that, that provides the security, as well as the fact that our election officials have reflected and our court system has reflected no systemic fraud. With respect to a philosophical discussion about opt-in, opt-out, I think that when it comes to something as important as elections, we may have to agree to disagree on that. I don't think that the folks who had an issue with receiving a ballot that they did not request were that inconvenienced in emailing all of us to tell us that. And so I thought that an opt-out option would be a great option for folks that were that motivated to let their election officials know they didn't ask for it and don't want it, to simply be able to opt out and not have that show up at their house, and quite frankly save the county some money and not having to send it if they don't want it.
Thank you. Yeah, and just to be clear, the concern that was always expressed was not the inconvenience of getting a ballot that was someone else's. It was the concerns over security. That person may say, well, I'm certainly not going to fill out.
Assemblyman, I feel like the bill sponsor has responded to the question. So do you have a new specific technical question?
I do, yes. Well, one final question, if I may. And
yes,
it's
one final, please.
Sort of a multi-part. So regarding, I think, Section 8.2, I'm just wondering why you believe it's good policy for us to accept ballots where the postmark date cannot be determined. I'm wondering if we know how often that happens, where a ballot comes back without a postmark date. I don't know if there's a subject matter expert who might speak to that. And are there other states that have provisions similar to this? Thank you.
Thank you again, Jason Fryer, for the record. Again, I think voter education is important. It's simply inaccurate to reflect that there's not a postmark, because there is. I think there are a lot of folks that objectively see a prepaid envelope and believe that because of that, it will not be postmarked. And I believe that we should address that in Assembly Bill 4 as well as Assembly Bill 321 in consultation with the Postal Service to verify that those would be postmarked. And to the extent that there are envelopes that were not postmarked, or the postmark was illegible, smudged, or otherwise damaged to where it couldn't be read, I think similar to the postmark requirement of 3 days, any of those that came in within that same period of time would be counted, and anything that came in after that would not be counted. But again, with respect to the postmark issue, I would defer to our election officials.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Assemblyman. With that, we see no other questions from members. I have one final question from Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Not a question, more a comment to the makers of the bill. I appreciate that. I represent a large constituency of seniors who can't oftentimes get out to vote by themselves. They were very thankful, and I received calls thanking us for the decisions that we made during the special session, not only because of COVID, but because they just didn't have the means to get to the polls, and they found this so much more convenient. I too, as my colleague said, I mailed in my ballot, but other family members in my household filled out their mail-in ballot and took it in person, and others voted in person. Giving our constituents options to participate in the process that is their right to participate in, I believe is our responsibility, and it's a responsible thing of this legislative body to do. And it does involve everyone that wants to be a part of the process who is registered and eligible to vote. So I thank you so much for the bill. It will have a positive impact on a number of families in our community.
Thank you, woman. At this point, not seeing any additional questions, we will go ahead and open up the lines for those wishing to testify in support. So broadcasting, if you can open that up for us. Again, I want to remind everyone that each person will have 2 minutes. And as always, I set my timer, so I will need to have people wrap it up at 2 minutes. And really, this is to ensure we can get as many people who want to testify, regardless of their position, but as many Nevadans that are calling in to have their voices and positions heard. We will hear up to 45 minutes in each position. So right now, I will start at 4:05. We will start 45 minutes in support of AB 321. So broadcasting when you're ready.
In order to testify in support of Bill AB 321, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 939, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Vasquez, S-N-C-A, Vasquez, V-A-Z-Q-U-E-Z. Good afternoon, Chair Miller and members of the committee. I am a community member and advocate for Mi Familia Vota, and we are a nonprofit organization focusing on improving political efficacy in the Latino community, and we are members of the Let Nevadans Vote Coalition. Today on Latino Lobby Day, I am calling in support of AB 321 because I believe it would work to improve access to the ballot for Latinos and working families throughout Nevada. AB 321 allows your community to choose a preferred method of voting, whether that is in person, by mail, or by dropping off their ballot at a secure election drop-off. By having a mail ballot sent to every active registered voter in Nevada who prepared this bill will who may not have the time outside of work to cast their ballot in person. AB 321 makes voting more accessible and safe, not just during pandemics, but permanently, and that's how voting should be: easy, accessible, safe, and secure. Mi Familia Vota is committing to increasing access to the polls for Latino voters, as well as protecting the voting rights of all Nevadans. AB 321 would work to do just that. At the time when voting rights are being threatened in states like Arizona, Michigan, and Georgia, this body has the opportunity to do what is right for Nevadans. I urge you to support AB 321. Thank you.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 130, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Christine Saunders. That's CHRISTINESAUNDERS, and I'm the Policy Director with the Progressive Leadership Alliance of Nevada, here in support of Assembly Bill 321. If you ask any of my colleagues here testifying this evening, they will confirm that I'm Nevada's biggest vote-by-mail fan. That's because prior to moving to Nevada in 2017, I'd gone a decade without ever voting in person. I grew up in Oregon, a state that has been voting by mail since 1987, and went to graduate school in Colorado, where they've been sending ballots to all registered voters since 2013. Nevada's record voter turnout in 2020, despite a pandemic, is in line with what these states have shown time and time again. Vote by mail increases turnout. This election also highlighted many of the benefits of voting by mail. First, the convenience makes voting much more accessible. Voters do not have to take time off work or find childcare to wait in line. Prepaid postage allows a voter to turn their mailbox into a ballot box, and drop boxes along with ballot collection increases access to the ballot for both busy urban workers as well as our rural and tribal communities where physical distance can be a challenge to participation. In Oregon, I used to get off the bus and drop off my ballot in a secure box right in the middle of downtown on my way to my college classes without having to make any change to my daily schedule. In addition, vote by mail helps people be more informed about their decisions. As a young adult, I remember completing my ballot alongside my mother, where I could ask questions about the process, and we could even debate the issues. With a mail ballot, I always had the opportunity to do my research or even skip a question and come back to it once I felt more informed. AB 321 will ensure that all eligible Nevadans are able to participate in our democratic system and have their voices heard at the ballot box. We urge your support. Thank you.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 695. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair Miller and members of the committee. This is Holly Wellborn, Policy Director for the ACLU of Nevada, testifying in support of AB 321. Thank you, Speaker Frierson, for your continued efforts to protect and enhance the fundamental right to vote, especially at a time when there are disturbing and blatantly unconstitutional efforts to suppress the vote in other states, particularly among Black, Indigenous, and people of color in impoverished communities. Our state was making the best of a bad situation when it turned to mail ballots and drop boxes as a way to keep voters safe during the COVID-19 pandemic. But the record-breaking turnout we saw in November shows that Nevada voters appreciated having multiple options. Indeed, this is not Costco and this is not a ride at a theme park. Voting is a fundamental right. The night of the 2020 primary election, the last voter in line cast their ballot at 2:30 in the morning. That is entirely unacceptable. Nevada is making its democracy stronger by refining our election processes and finding ways to make it easier for eligible voters to participate in safe and secure elections. Nevada has some of the best election officials in the nation. We commend Registrars Gloria and Spicula and Secretary Sagaski for the integrity with which they administered the 2020 election. I know firsthand the problems voters face in accessing the polls. I run a nonpartisan voter protection program in Washoe County, where I assist voters of all parties and all walks of life with understanding ID requirements, ballot box rules, and more. What Nevada needs is to make voting easier, and AB 321 does just that. Thank you so much for sponsoring this legislation. We encourage your support.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 171. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Hi, my name is Ted Papageorge, T-E-P-A-P-P-A-G-E-O-R-G-E. Greetings to Madam Chairman, Speaker, and the rest of the committee. My name is Ted Papageorge. I'm the President of the Culinary Workers Union. The Culinary Union supports Assembly Bill 321. Nevadans should be able to exercise their right to vote, and the Culinary Union believes this bill makes voting accessible and gives voters the choice on how to cast their ballot, which is especially important for the 60,000 shift workers that the Culinary Union represents who are employed in a 24-hour economy. Last year, the Nevada Legislature passed AB 4, which permitted Nevadans to vote safely in the midst of a pandemic by automatically sending active registered voters their mail-in ballot. As a result, 48.46% of Nevadan voters chose to vote. by mail for the 2020 general election. Similar to AB4, AB 321 allows the county board to begin counting ballots 15 days prior to election day. This ensures transparency through the process and provides ample time for signature curing and ID verification requirements for first-time voters, ensuring all votes are counted. It is important not to undermine the significance of early vote sites and election centers because voters still need access to in-person voting. In the 2020 general election, a culinary union guest room attendant went to vote after her shift, and she was the last one in line to cast her ballot. Voting is of a vital importance for our democracy, and AB 321 expands voting rights and removes barriers to register voters and participating in the electoral process. The culinary union urges the Nevada Legislature to support and pass AB 321. Thank you.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 094. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller with the last 3 digits, 094. Please press *6 to unmute.
Hello, my name is Alyssa Garule, ALYSSAGURULY. I am a sophomore studying political science at the College of Southern Nevada. Last June, I was able to vote in my very first election here in Las Vegas, Nevada. I was able to vote by mail as we were in the middle of the pandemic, and I felt this was the safest choice for my family and I. I also voted by mail in November for the general election. Many people in other states do not hold this privilege of always being able to vote by mail. I feel incredibly grateful to have had that option. I strongly believe this should continue to be a guaranteed option for Nevada voters since it would increase access for marginalized communities. Accessible voting should be a right and not a privilege. Seeing what has happened in Georgia this past week has drawn attention to the issue of voter suppression that is still very much present in our country. Our state cannot also fall backwards on this issue. By passing AB 321, we will become a state that will lead in expanding voting rights and create a stronger democracy. AB 321 is a prime example of quality legislation that will actually protect and expand the right to vote, rather than limiting access to the polls. It will build on our current mail-in ballot system and strengthen it. Voting is a right, and everyone should have different choices available to them while casting their ballot. Thank you, Speaker Frierson, Majority Leader Canizaro, and Governor Sisolak for your continued efforts of making voting accessible to all Nevadans and helping secure our elections. Thank you.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 201. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman Miller and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Emily Persad Zamora, EMILYPERSAUD-ZAMORA, and I have the privilege of serving as the Executive Director of Silver State Voices. I'm calling on behalf of the Let Nevadans Vote Coalition, a coalition of 22 organizations dedicated to ensuring fair and equitable elections for all Nevadans. I stand in support of AB 321 because it is imperative that every Nevadan is able to cast their ballot in a manner that is most convenient for them for all elections to come, whether that is in person, by mail, or by dropping their ballot off at a nearby ballot drop box. You're going to hear many people call in saying that this is going to promote voter fraud. That is nothing but fake news. Every day, our partners work with a variety of diverse constituencies, such as the AAPI, Black, Latino, Native, and labor communities. In 2020, we worked closely with these communities in our Get Out the Vote and nonpartisan election protection programs. In these programs, we viewed our electoral process from the perspective of your constituents. We were able to assist them throughout the whole process from the time that they registered to vote and answering their questions before and after they casted their ballot. In addition, we oversaw the 866 Our Vote hotline. From the span of October 17th and November 4th, there were 1,057 unique tickets. That's over 1,000 Nevadans who called in to ask questions or experience some type of issue at the poll. Thankfully, because of the many provisions of AB4, we were able to accommodate these issues. During the 2020 general election, more than 48% of all Nevadans voted by mail. This conversation about passing AB 321 should not be about political party beliefs. It should be about making the electoral system in Nevada.
Your time is up.
Yes.
So time is up, but I would encourage you to submit your comments in writing so that we can read the rest of them, please. Thank you.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 898. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Annette Magnus, Executive Director of Battleborn Progress. We are here in strong support of AB 321. Last year, as the pandemic created so much uncertainty around how our election would operate, the legislature rose to the occasion thanks to the efforts of Speaker Frierson to pass AB4, a bill which gave voters options on how to cast their ballot. Whether it was mailing back their ballot in its prepaid postage envelope, dropping off their ballot like I did, or voting in person at any of the numerous centers or in their county, Nevadans turned out in record numbers more than ever before to make their voices heard. AB 321 would allow Nevadans to enjoy that same convenience and ease of participation in our democracy for every election going forward with some additional improvements. During the 2020 election, our county registrars like Clark County Registrar Joe Gloria, Republican Secretary of State Barbara Sagaski, and their staff did an incredible job tabulating each and every eligible vote accurately. I had the privilege to formally observe this process in Clark County. We cannot thank them enough for their tireless work. AB 321 contains provisions to increase confidence in the process while safeguarding the right to vote. It standardizes the rigorous signature verification process used for mail ballots and requires election staff to be trained annually for signature verification. It also requires that the verification process be seen by a panel of approved voters by the county clerk. The Secretary of State will also be required to compare the statewide voter registration list every month to check the deaths of state residents. With these upgrades, state and local election officials will have the necessary tools to continue administering some of the best elections in the country. We thank Speaker Jason Frierson for again being a champion on voting rights and look forward to this body's support for this measure. We also look forward to Nevada to continuing being a leader in this area. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Right on the dot.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 005. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Hello, for the record, my name is Skylar Jordan, spelled SKYYLARJORDAN, and I'm the social media coordinator for Make It Work Nevada. I'm testifying in support of AB 321. I appreciate Speaker Frierson for AB 321 and for protecting democracy in Nevada. Now, I wasn't able to vote in the 2020 election despite being a strong voting rights advocate for many years now, and it can't be overstated enough how important AB 321 is, especially with what we're seeing happening in Georgia and multiple states around the country. Honestly, I don't know why we haven't done this already. The foundation of this bill is greater access and strength in democracy, making voting by mail permanent so that as many Nevadans as possible can participate in the process of selecting our leaders. We are in an all-hands-on-deck moment where we have to step up and take action for our communities, and the best way to do that is through voting. Furthermore, AB 321 gives me comfort as an international college student. This bill will make sure that I get my ballot even though I'll be several thousand miles away. Democracy isn't promised to any of us, and it's legislation like this that ensures the voices of the people are heard and honored. I urge you to support AB 321. Thank you.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 424. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair Miller and members of the committee. My name is Ora Washington, Washington. I want to talk to you about how important AB 321 is to me and other Nevadans who have no transportation. I rely on senior transportation, which is not always available. I am 79 years old, and it was with great pleasure that I was able to sit at my kitchen table and go over the mail ballot and instructions. Then I made the most important vote of my lifetime, and I was able to fulfill my duty as an American. I felt so joyful to have this ability. Every Nevadan should have this ability. I thank the state of Nevada for mail ballots and for helping me be a better citizen of Nevada and America. Thank you.
Caller with the last three digits, 419. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Thank you, Chair Miller and committee members. For the record, my name is Benjamin Challinor. That's BenjaminChalllinor, and I am the Policy Director for Faith in Action Nevada. And we are here in strong Frierson for his dedication to removing barriers from voting. While we're in support of the whole bill itself, I wanted to speak in particular about the provisions in the expanded voting options. The provisions of sending a mail ballot to all active voters is a great way to allow for all Nevadans who are eligible to cast their vote. Once a voter has received their ballot, it's as simple as filling out the ballot, signing it, and mailing it back. If a voter does not want to mail it back, they can always just drop it off at any of the drop boxes provided by the county elections department. In some instances, they can even drop it off as they're shopping for groceries. Ultimately, if a voter wanted to actually vote in person, they also have that option. By surrendering their ballot, a voter could vote early or on election day in person. In a time where Georgia, Texas, and other states are looking to make it harder for voters to cast their ballot, it's very encouraging to see our state expanding its options. With AB 321, even more Nevadan voters will have their choice on how they can vote, where they can vote, and when they can vote. We urge your support in passage of this great piece of legislation. Thank you.
Caller with the last three digits, 120. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Stephen Cohen for the record. In full support of the bill. We should be making it easier for people with disabilities to integrate similar to their peers without, and that includes voting. With that, Madam Chair, thank you, and I yield.
Caller with the last three digits, Caller with the last three digits, 582. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller with the last three digits, 582. Please press *6 to unmute. Caller with the last three digits, 944. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair Miller and members of the committee. My name is Ana Villatoro, ANNAVILLATORO, and I am calling in support of AB 321. I recently became a first-time voter, voting this past session was incredibly less intimidating as I had several options to vote: drop off, mail in, and in-person voting. As a first-time voter, these options were critical for me to cast my vote, as I also have limited transportation. Fortunately, my roommate and I created a plan to drop off our ballots together at a nearby drop-off location. AB 321 would allow all active registered voters to receive a ballot with prepaid postage, and each of those voters will be able to choose how they want to vote in the way that is most convenient and optimal for them. Again, as a first-time voter and Nevadan with limited transportation, AB 321 will be critical for me to vote next time and let my voice be heard. Thank you.
Caller with the last three digits, 242. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair Miller and committee members. For the record, my name is Reverend Leonard B. Jackson. That's LeonardJackson. I am the Director of Faith Organizing Alliance and a proud partner of Let Nevadans Vote. I stand in support of AB 321 because it is important to ensure this body keeps the door open and levels the playing field for our underserved and underprivileged communities. We stand in strong support of AB 321 because it would continue to enfranchise the communities we work with every day. Throughout this past year, we have seen our communities struggle, and we have disproportionately seen communities of color, especially the Black community, impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. The pandemic also impacted the way that we vote, and that's why we supported AB 4. But the history of disenfranchisement didn't start with this pandemic. We have seen over the course of history that people that I work with, people of color, have been disproportionately served, and it's found it harder to access the ballot box. We look at history as a way of telling a story, but the stage had already been set as states continue to disenfranchise communities over this past century. An example of this is the voter suppression that is taking place as we speak in Georgia right now. The question I leave you with today is, where will Nevada stand? AB 321 seeks to change all that, and while we watch many states across the country go backwards on the issue of voting rights, Nevada can be the shining example once again. This is our opportunity to make things right for all Nevadans, make sure that voting rights are accessible, and we have our God-given talent, the right to vote. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Reverend.
Caller with the last three digits, 715. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
My name is Taylor Patterson, TaylorPatterson. I am a member of the Bishop Paiute Tribe and the Executive Director of Native Voters Alliance Nevada. We are in support of AB 321 because it strengthens voting access for Native Americans across the state while still respecting tribal sovereignty. Indigenous people had to fight tooth and nail for the right to vote and then again to have the same access as every other citizen in this country. This bill will help right the wrongs of past voter suppression and move us in the right direction. Giving tribes an extended deadline to request a polling location relieves some of the burdens placed upon tribes each election year. The needs of every tribal community is different, and this bill not only recognizes that, but empowers each tribal nation to make decisions that are appropriate for their communities. Thank you, Speaker Frierson, for bringing forth this bill. Please vote to support the increase of voting rights for our Native people. Thank you, committee.
Caller with the last three digits, 528. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Barry Gold, BARRYGOLD, and I'm the Director of Government Relations for AARP Nevada. Sounds like Assemblyman Monroe Moreno may have a few AARP members in her family, but I want to say that AARP has been working on what we call voter engagement, not voter education, but voter engagement for quite a long time. This last election, we worked to make sure people knew how they could vote safely and securely, however they chose to vote, whether that be by mail or in person. What we all want to do is cast our ballots freely, safely, and equally. And this bill puts in place transparent processes that we can all trust. I'd like to quote an op-ed that was written by Steve Sebelius in the Las Vegas Review-Journal on March 25th. The last sentence of the article says, elections should be run with the idea that we should make it as easy as possible for every single eligible voter to participate. That's simple, isn't it? That's really simple. So AARP, on behalf of our 345,000 members across the state, and we all know that older adults are the most trusted voters. They vote every time. We strongly, strongly support this bill because this bill will create the freedom to vote however you choose. Thank you.
Caller with the last three digits, 135. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Good afternoon, Chair Miller and committee members. My name is Carrie Durmick. That is KERRY-DURMICK. I'm the Nevada Director with All Voters Local, a voting rights project housed at the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights. All Voting is Local is also a proud member of the Let Nevadans Vote Coalition. All Voting is Local fights to remove discriminatory barriers to voting before the next election, empowering communities of color, young people, low-income Americans, and voters with disabilities so that all voices can be heard. We are in full support of AB 321. Nevada voters need multiple mechanisms to participate in their right to vote while ensuring the process is safe and secure. And that's exactly what AB 321 does. In 2020, voting by mail was the most popular method of casting a ballot. According to the Secretary of State's office in Nevada, 48% of Nevada voters cast their ballot by mail, up from roughly 7% in 2016. AB 321's provisions ensure that every active registered voter will receive a mail ballot with prepaid postage and gives Nevada's voters something that they are already familiar with. Nevada needs to ensure that they are protecting everyone's right and freedom to vote. This bill would give Nevadans a variety of options to make their voices heard and cast their ballots in a safe way. When voters have options to vote in a way that they are most comfortable with, our democracy is stronger and better. All Voting is Local asks this committee to support AB 321. Thank you so much for your time.
Caller with the last three digits, 155. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Christy Cabrera, CHRISTI-CABRERA. I'm the Policy and Advocacy Director for the Nevada Conservation League, and we are in strong support of AB 321. We believe that the long-term health of our planet is linked to the health of our democracy. Passing strong laws to protect our environment depend on open, fair, and secure elections. And AB 321 will ensure that every Nevadan's voice is heard on Election Day. It is time for our state to embrace vote by mail as an option for Nevadans who want to cast their vote from home. This legislation requires county clerks to prepare and send mail ballots with prepaid postage to every UOCAVA and active voter. It also ensures security as mail ballots cannot be forwarded. Last year's unprecedented vote shows that this system not only works, but results in more participation among voters. AB 321 would improve our elections by making them more secure, more resilient, and more accessible to Nevadans. Every vote counts, and we are grateful for voting rights champions like Speaker Frierson for ensuring Nevada's thorough and secure process for tabulating ballots will be codified into law. Thank you for your time.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 169. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair and committee members. For the record, my name is Jennifer Fleischman. That's Jennifer, Fleischman, Fleischmann, and I am the co-director of organizing at Make the Road, Nevada. And I have my daughter behind me, as I'm sure you can hear. I am here in support of AB 321. This bill would ensure that our election officials are properly trained and that they are taking the appropriate steps to make sure that every vote is cast by an eligible voter, that every vote cast by an eligible voter in Nevada is counted. As is the case with many new experiences, there is a natural learning curve with the expansion of mail-in voting. That goes for both our community members as well as for our elected officials. AB 321 would ensure that a county clerk or registrar and their office must complete a forensic signature verification training approved by the Secretary of State. In 2020, Make the Road spoke to thousands of voters in Clark County, many of whom expressed confusion around how to ensure that their mail-in vote is counted. AB 321 would address these concerns by requiring that the election officials reach out to a voter via phone, email, or mail, in the case that a voter sent in a mail ballot with a missing or mismatched signature. This would also improve the security and veracity of our elections here in Nevada. As a state, we should be working to ensure that all eligible voters are able to feel secure and confident that their vote is being counted. Passing this bill is a step in the right direction. I strongly urge you to support AB 321. Thank you for your time and your commitment.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 338. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. This is Priscilla Maloney, PRISCILLA representing today the ASME REACH 4041 retirees. We are in strong support of AB 321 and thank Speaker Frierson and Assemblywoman Benitez Thompson for bringing it forward. The ASME retirees' third highest legislative priority this session, right behind their retirements and their health care, is preserving, protecting, and facilitating their right to vote. The things contained in AB 321, such as expanding polling places, voting by mail, drop-off box sites, greatly help vulnerable populations such as the elderly and the disabled. The 2020 Nevada election had historically high turnout from all methods of voting, despite the global pandemic and the challenges it posed for vulnerable citizens such as seniors. This bill expands on the good work done on AB 4 over the special session last summer and makes permanent those provisions that enhance and facilitate the most vulnerable in our state. So again, we thank the sponsors for bringing this forward and their work in this mission to see that everyone who's eligible to and wants to vote in Nevada can do so by any method they choose, and we thank them for their time and efforts in this regard. Thank you.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 576. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller 576, please press *6 to unmute.
Thank you, Chair Miller and members of the committee. My name is Eric Jang, ERICJENG, supporting this bill on behalf of the Asian Community Development Council. Right now in Nevada, we have more than 330,000 Asian Pacific Islander Americans, comprising around 10% of the total population, around 10% of the voting block as well. We amplify diverse stories and voices of our community and focus the issues that affect our livelihood, especially voting rights, including language access. We do nonpartisan voter registration, nonpartisan voter education, and nonpartisan voter outreach. As the fastest growing community in Nevada, we are aware about the infrastructure that's supporting the community need to catch up, including the way we vote. We would like to thank Speaker Frierson for bringing this bill to ensure our community's voices are heard. We are here because in 2020, we saw unprecedented voter turnout for our communities in Nevada and nationwide. From 2010 to 2016, the number of eligible AAPI voters grew 35% compared to 13% statewide, providing more options for Nevadans to access to the polls, removing obstacles to voter registration, including spelling out the exact documents needed and not needed for same-day voter registration, and automatic voter registration is a huge step for our communities. During the 2020 election, we sent in-language mailers to households, nonpartisan, telling people how to vote, and we saw so many first-time voters. Even our staff have reports that their parents, even grandparents, voting for the first time. So in the end, we really, by continuing to make voting safe and accessible to all Nevadans, we're able to allow more Nevadans to participate and make their voices heard in this election. It is critical that AB 321 passes and protect access to democracy for everyone. Thank you. We ask for your support for AB 321.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 431. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Hello, my name is Matthew DeFalco, Matthew, last name DEFALCO, and I'm here in strong support of Assembly Bill 321. First of all, I'm here testifying as a veteran, not on behalf of the State Treasurer's Office, though I do know that the Treasurer is in support of this legislation. Nevadans want choices when voting, and we proved that in November 2020 with record turnout. While states around the country are moving backwards on the issue of voting rights, AB 321 and other voting measures show that Nevada is a proud leader on this issue. As somebody who served in the military, I'm especially happy about how current members of the military will benefit from these options to vote. By allowing for expanded mail-in voting, same-day voter registration, and more, our military families will be able to participate in our elections no matter their circumstance. On behalf of military veterans like me, we applaud and thank Assembly Speaker Frierson for making voting more accessible in our state. Thank you for your time and support AB 321.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 577. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Chris Daly, DALY, Nevada State Education Association, the voice of Nevada educators for over 120 years. NSEA supports AB 321, critical voting rights legislation for Nevada, adopting the best practices of vote by mail, ensuring in-person voting options, and addressing concerns about election integrity and security. Educators ask students to use their voices and build their own agency. We believe our politics and electoral system should strive for greater enfranchisement because every person and every vote is important. Our parent organization, the National Education Association, has a long and rich history supporting greater democracy and enfranchisement. From past NEA President Charles Ormond Williams' effort to get Tennessee to ratify the 19th Amendment in 1920, the students affiliated with the California Teachers Association, who started the campaign to extend the vote to 18-year-olds back in 1967. With voting reforms passed during the special session, the 2020 Nevada general election was one of our smoothest, with very high turnout, even during a global pandemic. AB 321 is the logical next step from these reforms and fits well in the historic effort for greater democracy and participation. Thank you.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 818. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
My name is Manuel Santamaria. I'm a resident of Clark County, Nevada, and a veteran of the United States of America. I would like to speak in favor of AB 321. The preservation and perseverance of American values and our way of life were my impetus for entering the call to service after 9/11. The nation as a whole seemed under attack for daring to exist free and allowing its people liberty and expression and a voice. It pains me to see that what we gave for the right to have free and fair elections in other countries. As a member, I received my overseas absentee ballot in Germany, Iraq, and Afghanistan. I recall for the 2004 election, we were provided with voting assistance officers to hold our hand through the process.
2008, I filled out my ballot over dinner with all the convenience of time and information at my disposal. Voting was my right, and my country's democratic values will not forget its responsibility to allow me that right. Nevadans deserve to be able to vote freely and ably right here with as many avenues available to them as I had to me overseas. The impediment of their voices by obstacles in the name of partisanship and politics is a betrayal of those American values. This bill, it enshrines and protects the voices of Nevada voters. The ease of access and the expanding of options to cast a vote does more than just help repressed communities. It allows all Nevadans to participate and perpetuate American values with a free and fair election. Please pass AB 321. Thank you.
Caller 1, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Kent Irvin, Kentervin. Thank you, Chair Miller, committee members, and Speaker Frierson. I have voted in every election since 1976, no matter where I've lived, even abroad. But I have to say that last November was the most pleasant and easy voting experience. I got the automatic ballot in the mail. I was able to fill it out at my leisure, and then I chose to drop it off at a drop box so I knew it got there. It was so easy and secure. No wonder we had great turnout from both parties. If strong voter turnout is not every legislator's goal, that's a problem. Thank you.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 746. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Hello, my name is Amber McReynolds, and I'm the CEO of the National Vote at Home Institute. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee, and a special thanks to the Speaker for bringing this bill forward. And a special thanks also to Nevada's incredible election officials for their unwavering dedication to serving voters in 2020, and especially during a global pandemic. For the record, as I mentioned, I'm Amber McReynolds. I'm the CEO of the National Vote at Home Institute and Coalition. We are a nonpartisan, nonprofit, and group of technical experts dedicated to increasing access to voting options for every voter, especially with regards to mail ballots. And we stand in support of this bill. AB 321 is a common sense bill that makes permanent many of the policies Nevada implemented during the 2020 election cycle that benefited all voters regardless of party affiliation. By codifying these changes, Nevada supports and upholds its citizens' rights to vote and puts voters first, all while ensuring that election officials can best plan and allocate resources to support elections. I can personally speak to how impactful this bill will be for all voters. As the former director of elections in Denver, I helped to design and oversee the implementation of Colorado's election law over 8 years ago. Not only did we execute safe and secure elections and become a national model, we also saw engagement increase and the experience of voters improve, just as you've heard today. Nevada saw turnout increase from 2016 to 2020 in a substantial way. Voting by mail is not just convenient for voters, but it provides benefits for election officials too. There are cost-saving components in processing absentee ballot requests, and also systematic and operational improvements that will happen over time. Additionally, it lessens the amount of voters who vote on a singular day and allows for a more smooth election day during the busiest time. Voting is a right afforded to every American. We applaud the thought and consideration put into this bill to protect the rights of all Nevadans.
Thank you so much for your comments. And if you have additional comments, please submit them in writing, please. But thank you for your comments. Broadcasting with that was our last call in support because our 45 minutes is up. Anyone else, I don't know if there are still people waiting on the line. If you didn't have an opportunity to speak, again, we're trying to be concise and fair. So please submit your comments in writing. They will be read and considered. With that, broadcasting, would you please open up for anyone wishing to testify in opposition to AB 321? We will also allow 45 minutes and 2 minutes per speaker.
To testify in opposition of AB 321, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 112, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and begin.
My name is Bruce Parks, BruceParks. I would just like for you to know that in 2020, my vote did not count. I know that because there were over 122,000 incidents of voter fraud that were delivered to the Secretary of State's office, which she refused to investigate. This bill does nothing to provide more opportunity. What it in fact does is provides more opportunity for voter fraud. When AB 4 was being considered, there were over 5,000 people that wrote in on the Nellis website against that bill. There were 76 people that wrote in favor. 76 to 5,000, and AB 4 was passed. This legislature does not care what the people of Nevada think, and they clearly demonstrated it when they voted for AB 4. If you want to secure the votes of the voters of Nevada, then establish voter ID or thumbprint ID. When people go to vote on election day, the only day that you get to vote, you're presented with a paper ballot and a number 2 pencil. You do away with the counting machines. Then I know that my vote counts. We already have established procedures for people to receive a ballot by mail. It's called absentee ballot. It's real simple, it's real easy, and it's secure. All the other mail-in voting just facilitates fraud. There are 4 states that currently have all mail-in voting. In every one of those states, there's a predominant party that dictates what happens in those states. For instance, in the state of Washington, a heavily Democrat state, no Republicans win in that state. The same in Utah, a heavily Republican state. No Democrats win. Mail-in voting is a failed system. I'm totally opposed to it.
Thank you, sir, for your comments. And if you have additional comments, you may submit them in writing, please.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 588, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Thank you and good afternoon. For the record, my name is Jim Hindle, Jimhindle, and I am the Vice Chair of the Nevada Republican Party. The Nevada Republican Party strongly opposes Assembly Bill 321. Yesterday, both the Nevada GOP Chair McDonald and Assembly Minority Leader Titus went on record in their opposition to 321. This bill would ensure voting irregularities and all the issues with the 2020 election that the GOP in Nevada has documented and submitted to the Nevada Secretary of State for investigation. It is gratifying that in the public statement confirming the receipt of our complaints, the Secretary of State's office acknowledged that they were already investigating many of the irregularities we highlighted. Mailing ballots to all registered voters, including tens of thousands with known bad addresses, is a waste of taxpayer money and puts ballots out in circulation for bad actors to steal and submit, as documented to happen in 2020. The opt-out provision of this bill does nothing to address the cleanup of voter registration rolls and the elimination of ballots blowing in the wind. It is prudent total quality management practice to complete analysis of past performance to identify areas for process correction and improvement before implementing changes in practice. Clearly, it is premature to adopt the provisions of AB 321 without first completing the investigation of acknowledged irregularities from the last cycle. There are numerous issues of concern with this proposed bill. I encourage the members to refer to the letter Nevada GOP Chairman McDonald submitted to the committee earlier today with specific concerns of how AB 321 compromises the electoral rights of Nevadans. The text the electoral rights of all Nevadans
sir.
and oppose AB
Thank
321.
you, sir.
Thank you.
Please submit any additional comments in writing, please.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 373. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon. My name is Bob Russo, B-O-B-R-U-S-S-O, and I strongly oppose AB 321. One of the most devastating effects of the November election is that it left a considerable portion of the electorate distrusting the election process and a huge scar on our nation, including the state of Nevada. This is not a Democrat versus Republican issue. It's an election integrity issue. Unfortunately, this bill does absolutely nothing to restore election integrity. It would ensure that the voting irregularities we observed in the last election under AB 4 continue indefinitely. Mail-in ballots would stand with no changes to clean up the voter rolls. It establishes a mail ballot counting boards that are exclusively appointed by the clerk registrar, raising questions of transparency. It allows ballots to be completed by another person, including for those that cannot read or write. And it does not require someone to appear in person with a valid ID the first time they vote. These are just a few issues of concern with this bill. Mail-in ballots are a waste of money and ripe for misuse, especially when the option to request an absentee ballot is so easily available. It should be in the interest of both parties to initiate practical election reform that includes cleaning up the voter rolls so that we are assured that our votes will count and not be canceled out by someone trying to cheat the system. I still prefer paper ballots accompanied by voter IDs, simple and straightforward. Again, the measures in this bill will not restore integrity and trust in our election process. No, they will open the door to potential election fraud and further weaken and divide our state in the process. This bill should be thrown out before more damage is done to our state. Please oppose AB 321. Thank you very much.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 504. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Hello, my name is Brittany Sheehan, BrittanySheehan, and I would like to start by making a correction for the record. Someone from the ACLU had testified saying that in the primary, the last voter had cast their ballot at 2 a.m., and I would like to remind everybody, during the primary, we did have mail-in voting, and I know that because I spent 12 hours on June 9th at one of the only 3 voting centers in Clark County, and I spent the day spraying sunblock on voters, and I burned my own eyeballs to do so. So the issue in the primary was that there was only 3 voting centers, and that was actually an upgrade because they initially wanted to only offer 1. And as far as the mail-in ballots go, I currently have 7 in my possession, and those have been reported to the Secretary of State. But I have a concern that we don't understand volunteerism in Nevada, and currently we are trying to convince our legislators that an opt-out system isn't a good system for organ donation. So I feel as though a better idea would be a plain yes or no checkbox when the voter registers, the same way they choose their party preference. And this would also be cost effective since printing unrequested ballots does cost taxpayer money. Thank you.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 555. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Hi, yes, I'd like to give my opinion as far as ask you to please oppose AB 321. I am a disenfranchised voter. I saw how my state handled voting, particularly Joe Gloria here in Clark County. Over 42,000 people voted more than once. At least 1,500 dead people are recorded as voting. More than 19,000 people voted even though they didn't live in Nevada. And the list goes on and on and on. I'm a culinary union member. By the way, Ted Papa George does not speak for me. I don't agree at all with his policy on this and some other issues, but, you know, this is a right but you shouldn't have ballots just hanging out there. The ballots were thrown away. They were left laying there. Anybody could do anything they wanted to do with it. Joe Gloria turned down the resolution, so anything with an invalid signature could not be determined to be invalid. That's known because people put in fake names like Donald Duck or something and sent them in, and they were being found to be valid. And this is in the RJ. This is not anything new. If citizens, they can leave the house. Hello? Okay. So citizens, if they can leave the house, they can go ahead and vote. Costco, the last row of cars was filled, and there's no social distancing in there. Everybody's in there. Everybody was shopping and doing all these things. If that can happen, then everybody can get out to vote. There's no reason why they can't. Also, military. I heard some military people saying that they now have a way to vote. They've always had absentee ballots. I don't know what they're talking about with that. That's always been the case. And also, it's very easy to vote. You don't have to have it laying around your house and think, I'm going to vote this way on this issue. Well, let me take a week and vote. No, you have a sample ballot. You go over the issues, you become an informed voter, and then you go. It doesn't need to be this long, drawn-out issue.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 217. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
My name is Ed Gonzalez, EDGONZALEZ. I'm a person of color, I'm a Latino, and I'm proud of the fact that my vote has never been suppressed in this state. I am opposed to AB 321. My concern lays out in a couple of areas. With the mail ballots we've seen, I live in an apartment complex. I have seen both in the primary and the general election, many ballots just laying around, and to me, gives the opportunity for mischief that we can easily prevent. Number two, when it comes to a ballot being mailed to your home, I think I agree with the caller. I think a better process, if we're going to do something like that, is give the voter a true choice and let them opt in to an absentee ballot, even if that's included on a box on a voter registration, in the same way where I pick a political party, I pick which language I want my ballot in, or if I want a larger size font, or if I want a sample ballot. I think that would be a good process. My concern as well is I've been a member of the Henderson Charter Committee, and we've looked at mail ballots multiple times for city elections. And one of the things that I've noticed is the fact that counties don't have the proper equipment to ensure a safe and secure election because they don't have the ability to process so many mail ballots. There's going to be additional costs that Washoe County has mentioned, and in Clark as well. We've also seen increases in adjudicated ballots, which are ballots that cannot be read by the machines, and duplicate ballots, which are ballots that are recreated by election officials for one reason or another. Those are some instances that need to be corrected in this bill and in the process. Also, we've heard places where this will help veterans and the disabled to vote. There's already a process for that with electronic ballots, and this committee has already heard a bill to expand that to disabled voters. So they have that opportunity. Since 2016, we've had less voter locations, and if we want to increase access to the vote, we can increase and have more voting locations in areas of color if that's what this body sees fit. Thank you.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 842. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Hi, my name is David Gibbs, David Gibbs. I'm a proud veteran and resident of Clark County who voted absentee in every election I voted in from the time I was 18 until I was in my 40s because I was not living in my home state. I have some major issues with the bill. If you think that they're not going to wind up with absentee ballots, mail ballots sitting around trash dumpsters, or being delivered to multiple addresses or multiple people at the same address, I think you're highly mistaken. Number two, I think the whole opt-out thing, if somebody can opt out to getting a mail-in ballot, they can just as easily opt in to getting a mail-in ballot. That's the process that has always been in place, and I don't see why it needs to change. Number three, I think all ballots need to be received by the close of the polls on Election Day. opening up the opportunity of ballots being received for multiple days after the election just diminishes the confidence that people have in the outcome or in the reception of the ballots and the validity of the ballots. So these are all issues that I have a problem with this bill. The biggest issue I have is what you euphemistically are calling ballot assistance, which is basically ballot harvesting. You know, we've already had a process in place that exists for people to have their ballots turned in for them, and it's been limited to family members. Don't see why that needs to change. That process exists, the process has existed, and it has been used successfully. So those are my issues with this bill. You're changing things that don't need to be changed, and we had elections from 2018 into the past that have had some of the processes in place that we existed, and people voted just fine. Okay, so there's no need to do this. Thank you.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 607. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Thank you, Chair Miller. My name is Scott Hohen, Scotthon, and I'm a resident of Carson City. Thank you for allowing me to voice my opinion that is shared by many of my friends, neighbors, and family members. Please vote no on AB 321. I agree that you want to make it easier to vote, but don't make it easier to cheat at voting. I believe you're making it too easy to cheat with this bill for a variety of reasons already mentioned. You're going too far in allowing the elections to always be questioned with possible fraud. Voting is a right and a responsibility. There are rules to comply with when you go to vote in person or drop off your ballot at a secure ballot box. And most comply with the rules, but others cheat, and you're keeping those options open for those that cheat. Don't allow ballots to be mailed to voter rolls that have not been cleaned up for deceased voters, undeliverable addresses, or inactive voters. As a poll worker in the past election, too many voters brought in ballots to the polls that were not theirs, that they had received in the mail at their house. Mandate that the voter rolls be cleaned up more than the vital record match that you've talked about. Again, mailing ballots without being requested opens the door to cheating. Let voters opt in rather than opt out. Please don't allow ballots to come in days after and be counted after Election Day. A ballot should be dropped off prior to or on Election Day by the voter and not allowing harvesting by others. A ballot should be cast in person during voting hours. An absentee ballot should be postmarked no later than Election Day and be counted no more than a couple of days after the election. Be strict on the postmark rules. Don't allow voters to harvest or turn in ballots that are not their own. It was a felony before the pandemic in AB 4, and it worked to discourage cheating. Don't let others fill out and sign a ballot if it isn't theirs. You're opening the door to cheating. Thank you for listening. Fair and secure elections is a must for 100% of our voters to believe in the election results.
Thank you, sir.
Don't make it easy for people to cheat.
Sir, your time is up. Thank you so much.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 160. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller 160, please press *6 to unmute.
Yes, hi, I'm sorry. I didn't hear it the first time. Thank you for listening to me. My name is Pam Dar. I'm calling, I'm just a regular person. I'm not with any organization. And I'm calling in, I don't want to see this be passed. I've been here since 1987. I worked a lot of hours at my career, and I always found time to vote. People that couldn't make it to the polls had family members and limited mail-in that was, when necessary to guard our elections. I've listened closely to this meeting, and a few things that stood out. As for citizens, non-citizens, is there anything that loopholes to allow them to vote? I did not hear that answered. Many countries got rid of mail-in because of fraud, including Mexico, because of these issues and limited mail-in ballots. As for harvest balloters, they were pushy. When they would text me, I researched them. They came from Washington, D.C. They stated they were nonpartisan, but they were progressive. They also showed up at my mom's group home, and they really were persistent on trying to go in. But it had to be explained to them. Most of them couldn't vote because they were not at that point where they could. And the ones that could, the families were helping. Another is when we find, when we find fake addresses and names, there's no remedy. It was videotaped with current. Hello?
Yes, continue.
Okay, sorry, it's a bit loud. It was videotaped as proof of fake addresses, the dirt lots, underpasses, lawns in front of casinos where people registered to vote. Votes should count, not get canceled. I did submit in writing, and I'll leave it at this. I did help my mom. She passed away last month, and that's why I guess I'm emotional. That was her first vote. It was erased because of all the questionable non-citizen voting, underage people voting, out-of-state voting, questionable
Thank you, ma'am.
addresses voting. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
And I submitted.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 112. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller 112, is your phone on mute? Caller 112, press *6 to unmute. Caller 112, you're unmuted on our end. Is it possible that your phone itself is muted?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Chair Miller and committee members, for the record, my name is Yolanda Knaak, YOLANDA KNAAK. I'm a resident of Washoe County. My zip code is 89451. Please vote no on AB 321. In the last election, I was making phone calls for a political candidate, and I got a voter on the phone, and I asked him if he had received his ballot, and he said, yes, I received 2 ballots, and I don't even live in Nevada. So voters should not be receiving more than 1 ballot, obviously, and voters should ballots were sent out of state, unfortunately, and then ballots should only be sent to those that requested them. My mother, who passed away last month, was handicapped, and she never had any trouble getting a ballot mailed to her, and she filled it out, and then I was able to take it in for her. I just want you to know that California is well known for voter fraud because of ballot harvesting, and we do not want that here. Also, AB 4 from last summer, you make it sound great, but unfortunately, you did not even investigate reported fraud. And you know how everyone was saying, "Oh, there's no fraud," but there was no investigation of the 2020 election. So how do you even know whether or not there was fraud? Because there was no investigation. Voter confidence is at an all-time low in our state. So please, please, please oppose AB 321. Thank you so much.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 264. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller 264, please press *6 to unmute. Caller with the last three digits 099. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller 099, press star 6 to unmute.
Hello. My
We can
name
hear
is
you.
Wayne Gordon, WAYNEGORDON, and I'd like to start with a question. Was there anybody really in the chamber? We can't tell because we're not allowed to be there. Yes, no, maybe?
Sir, this
I'd
is
like
for
to
you
point-
to testify in opposition of the bill. Please, we are here and we are listening, so please continue.
There's a lot that needs to be done to improve our election procedures, and but this is hardly the correct bill. First of all, if I recall correctly, when you had special session last year, you did not allow any Republicans to have any input on 4, and it was basically what you're using to start with. 2, there's been a lot of discussion. It's been mentioned a lot that you have the right to vote, and I would certainly agree with that. I've been exercising my rights since for a long time. And but you, with any and all rights come responsibilities, and the responsibilities to make sure that you have is to, 1, register, make sure that you are a correct voter for the like I can't go over to California anymore and vote, and they can't come over there, so I have to be eligible to vote. So I have a responsibility to register, to give the state, the county registrar, a respectful time to verify that I am eligible to vote. And when we don't do that, we're disrespecting the whole procedure, because we need to be eligible to vote. Additionally, the voter has responsibilities to know who they're voting for and what their positions are. Not just
Sir, thank you
because
so
of
much.
my-
Your time is up. You may submit the rest of your comments in writing.
Caller with the last three digits 261, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Committee Chairman and committee members, this is Bill Herrenberg, BILLHARENBURG, and I stand in opposition to AB 321. Dave Gibbs really did a great job summarizing all the problems with this. I am a disenfranchised voter. I have zero confidence in you being able to count my ballot. I just feel very emotional about this. I feel very disturbed that Nevada can't provide a good election for us. I know everyone worked hard. I know all the election people worked hard, but there are just so much room for fraud. We need voter ID instead of signature verification. We should not do same-day registration. There's no opportunity to really verify who that person is. We should not wait 4 days after, even though it is a negotiated 4 days. I appreciate your hard work in negotiating, but it should be 0 days. You should count the ballots on the day, and that's it. So I stand in opposition of AB 321, and thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Caller with the last three digits 155, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman and members of the committee. My name is Mark Karras, Karris. I am a Nevada licensed attorney, licensed both in the state of Nevada and in the Federal District Court of Nevada. I stand in opposition to AB 321 for the following reasons. AB 321 arose from AB 4 passed by the legislature this past summer during an emergency session, primarily because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Were it not for the COVID-19 pandemic, the legislature would not be seeking to make mail-in voting permanent here in Nevada. I find it interesting that during all of the commentary period and the presentation by Speaker Frierson, as well as the other committee members, there was no discussion about the expense for mail-in voting, to every member of the citizenry here in Nevada. I also found it interesting that during his presentation, Speaker Frierson noted that sitting at his kitchen table, he, like everyone else who voted via mail last election, finally had the opportunity to, in the comfort of their home, review the ballots. But as another caller has already indicated, we receive sample ballots all the time, in which you are able to educate yourself not only on the candidates, but the issues. I also find that many of the callers who called in support of AB 321 acted as if there was no options whatsoever for voting. Clearly in Nevada, we have had for quite some time, in more than 20 years that I've lived here, early voting, absentee voting upon request, as well as election day voting. Voting, as Alexander Hamilton once said, is the most important right that we have. And Samuel Adams went on to say,
Thank you, sir.
It is a solemn
Sir, your
trust.
time is up. Thank you. You can submit the remainder of your remarks, please.
Caller with the last three digits, 543. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Hi, this is Tracy Thomas, TRACEY THOMAS. It is abundantly clear the authors of this bill have never had to search for John Smith in a database. Birth dates are absolutely necessary for locating a voter who hasn't brought their sample ballot, can't remember their last address, and who have common names. As a polling place manager for 20 years, I personally observed 3 couples managing polling places in Washoe County, and 50% of the teams collecting ballots from drop boxes were married couples. I also personally flagged 3 voters who succeeded in casting a digital ballot after the registrar had already received their paper ballot. This was not party specific. One was Democrat, one was Republican, and one was independent. Many of the arguments for this bill have been for the ability to vote a paper ballot by mail, like this is a new concept. Newsflash, this is a lie. Voting by mail has already been available for Nevada voters for decades. Absentee ballots provides for every exact argument in favor of this bill. Sample ballots are already mailed to every voter to help prepare choices. There is no need to recreate this wheel. There is nothing currently preventing anyone from voting by mail. If voters wish to vote by mail, they merely have to request that online. It is already provided for in our statutes. Voting is not mandatory for U.S. citizens. This bill essentially mandates every registered voter as an absentee voter. The increase in ballot cast by mail was due to the lockdown, not a new concept. It is very unlikely these numbers will be seen again anytime soon. It is disgusting how this legislation is deceiving these voters for political agendas and trying to take credit for a concept that has been used for decades. In addition to the tremendous waste of resources and on undelivered ballots, current registrars and clerks do not have the manpower to administer it. Thank you.
Caller with the last three digits, 319. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Madam Chair, Mr. Speaker, and members of the committee, Melissa Clement, MELISSA-CLEMENT, representing myself, calling in opposition to AB 321. Voting is a family affair for my family and always has been. Sample ballots arrive early and we meet as a multi-generational group, from babies to elderly, to discuss each race and each question. We then go together to vote, followed by a family meal. This is a tradition in our family that started when I was a child and when I hope my children continue with their own. The November election was hard. My father died in June of this past year. It was painful and jarring to receive his ballot in the mail for the general election. It was painful for the weeks after the election as my brother and I checked regularly to make sure that his vote was not stolen. Both of us wondered why he would receive a ballot, given the office from which we picked up his death certificate is across the courtyard. From where the voter registrar is. AB 321 attempts to fix this in Section 44, Sub 7, but it has weaknesses. The State Registrar of Vital Statistics will only have a partial list of dead Nevada voters. In such a highly transient state like Nevada, registered voters often die in other states. What mechanism allows these dead voters to be identified and removed from the rolls? I encourage you to change the section to include Social Security death records to make sure that dead people are removed from the rolls. Also, in reading this section, it does not mandate that the dead are actually removed, just identified. Other concerns, for those who opt out of the mail ballot, will there still be a sample ballot sent? Your job, committee, is to extend the vote to all legal voters while protecting their vote by making sure it is not diluted by illegal votes. Additionally, the amended language requires a minimum number of early voting and election day voting locations. But for a county like Nye, a minimum of one location is particularly challenging given the geographical distance between, for instance, Tonopah and Pahrump. A 2-hour and 40-minute drive. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 170. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Hi, my name is Gina St. Ores, that's Gina ST Ores, and I oppose AB 321. And I want to just begin by mentioning that I was listening to those that approved it, and maybe 4, although some hard to understand from, were just independent people. The rest were special interest groups. But so far, the people against it, most of us are your voters, are your regular voters, the people that are seeing what's going on. And I am just amazed at the ignoring of all the fraud investigations and lack of pursuit to deal with it in this pushing through basically AB4 package when there has been a lot of controversy and yet not being addressed. And another thing, if you guys want to utilize the United States Postal Service, put a huge burden on it. If you read things like the Nextdoor app, there are constant complaints of misdelivered mail by the Postal Service, not Amazon, not UPS, the Postal Service, missing packages, missing mail, and they're going through some changes right now, but you want to utilize them as a trustworthy service for mail-in voting? When we have absentee voting, I'm not following why you think this is a better thing to do. In fact, I'm really questioning why you think this is a better thing to do. The security of our votes, the security of our nation was paid by the lives by many people, and my husband served overseas. You know.
Thank you.
Thank
you. You can submit the rest of your comments.
Don't respect that.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, well, thank you. Bye-bye.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 924. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Hello, my name is Alida Benson, Alida Benson, Political Director of the Nevada Republican Party. I am calling in opposition to AB 321. Every member of this committee has doubtless set foot in a 7-Eleven at some point in their lives. I bring this up because a 7-Eleven has better security than our elections in Nevada. A 7-Eleven has cameras and inventory management. Our casinos in Nevada have cameras every few feet with sophisticated security for guarding casino chips. If only our elections had the same standards as a casino cashier chain, cage for ballot chain of custody. The Nevada Republican Party offered to pay for ballot counting in Clark to be live streamed to the public to ensure any voter could be part of ensuring a transparent election in our biggest county in a COVID-safe manner. Washoe County's election department did this for free. In Clark County, Joe Gloria refused to have cameras in ballot counting facilities. He refused to allow meaningful observation. When whistleblowers came forward to testify under penalty of perjury about the lack of ballot custody, the ballots processed with a shape instead of a signature, and how they were directed to process ballots with out-of-state ID, all of this could have been visible to the public, and it was hidden. Our police officers wear body cameras. Voting is a right. Why shouldn't election workers have the same standard to ensure transparency? Shouldn't our most essential right have the highest protections? This bill does nothing to ensure transparent elections and everything to hide from observers and the media how our elections work. I ask every member of this committee to give the same standard of care to our ballot that our biggest industry gives to their gambling chips. This is not an unreasonable standard. Voters deserve to have a clear chain of custody for ballots and the right to meaningfully observe at every step of the electoral process. We have submitted a number of supporting documents from election department whistleblowers to this committee. We hope you review them, and we hope you vote no on AB 321. Thank you for your time.
Caller with the last three digits, 490. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Hello, my name is Cyrus Ojadi, CYRUSHOJJATY. I used mailed-in vote. My ballot was counted on the 7th. I think that was a little bit too late. I think there was a lot of fishy signs when the counting was going to be slowed 2 days after the election. This really raised a lot of red flags. And I also think it's kind of disgusting how many states are still trying to change laws after the election, not just here, but also in Georgia. And I think it's pretty obvious the fact that you are trying to create an outcome that is based on your favoritism. And the same thing with Georgia, because they have a certain agenda as well. Local news media, Channel 8, did a lot of reports how dead people voted and even a DACA recipient voted. And of course, it's pretty obvious why these caravans that are coming across, it's pretty obvious that we don't even know, hasn't been told on whether they're going to vote or not. And by the way, election fraud isn't just something against one side. I believe that in 2016 Democratic primary, Bernie Sanders was cheated. It can happen either side. And I think it's pretty obvious why you guys are doing this is because, as you know, the Culinary Workers Union is a main driver force in elections. And we know the hospitality industry has not come back. It's not going to come back to where it was. So what do you guys have to do in order to fill the deficit? You have to change the election laws, which will encourage the outcome that you want. Certainly, there was a lot of fishy things that happened, and honestly, I haven't received a lot of good evidence to prove that this is going to really be a truthful election. Please do so. And by the way, why don't we have thumbprint? Why can we make it sure in a way where people will print their thumbs, make sure it was the actual real person, and check to make sure that the vote was counted? So at least this mail-in system could have some compromises. No counting the day after election, and there's a thumbprint. So there's not even some flexible considerations. But anyway, until there's some few changes made,
thank you, sir.
I urge the vote no.
Sir, your time is up. Thank you.
Caller with the last three digits, 304. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, committee. My name is Jim DeGraffenreid, JIMDEGRAFFENREID. I'm the Republican National Committee man for the state of Nevada. The Nevada Republican Party stands in strong opposition to this bill. As was mentioned earlier today, this bill is presented to extend the provisions of AB 4, a bill that was rushed through under cover of darkness 90 days prior to the election. Proponents pretended this was done to improve safety due to the pandemic, but that was certainly not the case because we already had universal absentee balloting in Nevada, which has allowed any voter without the need to give a reason to be able to vote at home if they want. This bill does precisely nothing to make legitimate voting any easier or more accessible. Many states do offer universal mail-in voting, but these are states with clean voter rolls. By contrast, Nevada voter rolls are among the most poorly maintained in the nation, in large part due to our transient population and cumbersome procedures that make it hard for clerks to maintain clean rolls. In some cases, voter rolls are poorly maintained by choice. Earlier this session, the Clark County Registrar admitted on record that he had mailed tens of thousands of general election ballots to known bad addresses. Through a FOIA request, we obtained a list of 81,971 Clark County voters who were mailed ballots, even though their primary election ballot had been returned as undeliverable. Astonishingly, 8,529 of these ballots were returned and counted. This bill is presented as a way to increase voter turnout, but the facts show that AB 4 didn't increase turnout. At 77.26%, 2020 statewide turnout was only about 1/2% higher than the 2016 election. Far from being record turnout, 2020 turnout was down more than 3.5% from the 80.77% in the 2012 election. We cannot have fair elections when ballots are mailed to everyone on poorly maintained voter rolls, particularly when signatures are only randomly spot checked when the ballots come back and there is no meaningful observation of ballot counting allowed, as we experienced in 2020. We know of more than 15,000 ballots that should have been undeliverable for various reasons, yet were somehow returned and counted. Many of these ballots were sent to vacant lots, empty buildings, non-existent addresses,
Thank you,
or to
sir.
addresses from which
Sir,
mail had
that
been
is your
recently
time.
returned.
Thank you, sir. You can submit the rest of your comments to us. And with that broadcasting, that was 45 minutes. So we've given equal time to both the support and the opposition. The same offer and procedure to those testifying in opposition. If there is anyone still on the phone lines, please feel free to submit your comments to us in writing. So with that, we will close the testimonies in opposition and broadcasting. Can we open up anyone who is interested in testifying in neutral?
Callers wishing to testify in neutral on AB 321, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 576. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Hello, my name is Deanna Spicula. It's DeannaSpicula, and I am the Washoe County Registrar of Voters. And I wanted to thank the speaker for meeting with local election administrators on this bill earlier this week. And I prepared a written statement which I have submitted, so I will be brief here. In the state, we have been providing no-fault mail-in ballots securely and accurately for some time, and so expanding this program area is a matter of making sure that it is done mindfully and that county election officials, facilities, and staffing levels are expanded as well so that we can successfully implement this expansion of all mail-in in elections for future elections. Again, I just wanted to thank the speaker and, of course, everyone who's involved in working on this bill and making sure that we come up with something that can work for all of election officials and for our citizens that vote in the state of Nevada. Thank you.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 792. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good evening, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Aubrey Roulette, AubreyRowlatt, and I am the Carson City Clerk Recorder testifying in neutral. I wanted to take this opportunity to also say thank you to Speaker Frierson for meeting with the rural counties in Washoe County yesterday. I, too, have submitted a comment on Nellis and will be brief. AB 321 makes a significant change to how our offices need to be staffed and configured in order to facilitate an all-mail election. This is a significant ask for counties to do and have ready to go for the 2022 election. With that said, Nevada County clerks and registrars, as well as all their staff, will always go above and beyond to successfully implement legislation that is passed. Again, thank you, Speaker, for working through this bill with us, and I thank you for your time.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 328. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller 328, you are muted on our end. Is it possible your phone is muted?
I'm sorry. My name is Linda Buckard, LindaBuckardt, and I've been taking a lot of notes that I've heard throughout all the testimonies. I would like to say, please not on our Constitution. We need to clean up our rolls and offer an opt-in. It will save us thousands of dollars. There were dozens of people friends of mine who tried to verify that their ballot had been counted, and I had to send many of them to the Secretary of State website to inform them their vote hadn't been counted. There were lines at the polling place because they had to sanitize the plastic, the chairs, the pens, everything.
Ma'am, the line is open for testimonies in neutral, and this sounds as if you're in opposition.
I'm stating some things that I heard during this.
Okay.
I attended Clark County training sessions in August. I never learned any signature verification. In the polling places, we were...
Your testimony, this is for those testifying in neutral, meaning that they don't favor or dislike the bill in either way. They're just stating facts about the bill and the policy and the operation of it.
Okay. The governor seems to take over some responsibilities as Secretary of State, and I believe the signature verification was reduced to 40%.
Okay,
and
ma'am.
I don't believe that's right. Okay, thank you. Bye.
Much.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 477. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin. Chair, the neutral line is open and working. However, we have no more callers to testify in neutral on AB 321.
Okay, thank you. I do believe, Mr. Gloria.
Chair, pardon me. We had a couple of people just come in the last second. Let me see if they wanted to testify in neutral.
Okay.
To testify in... Sorry, go ahead, Chair.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, please.
To testify in neutral, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, the line is open and working. However, we have no more callers to testify in neutral on AB 321.
Thank you for that. I believe I see Mr. Gloria's hand up. Were you wishing to testify in neutral?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Joe Gloria, Registrar of Voters, Clark County. That's spelled Joegloria. I am here to testify neutral for Clark County, Nevada. Along with the other clerks and registrars, I want to thank the speaker for always reaching out. And I was appreciating that we have good input to provide and taking that input and implementing it into the bill through his amendments. I only want to make clear, as I have also submitted my statements, that there is a substantial fiscal note. We are prepared to serve according to whatever is passed in the legislature. That it is a big leap for us to go all mail in a short period of time. So I just want to make clear that we can't possibly support without the financial help that we've outlined in all of our fiscal notes throughout the county. And I know I'm not alone. There are several officials who also submitted. However, we have done the due diligence and we have run the numbers and we have submitted good fiscal notes. As long as somebody can provide the help with that financing, we should be able to provide. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. And with that, we will close the testimonies for neutral. Speaker Frierson, just wondering if you wanted to make any final remarks.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair, and members of the committee. Again, for the record, Jason Frierson. I want to thank you all for your attention and for your questions. These are important matters that none of us should or do take lightly, and I certainly appreciate the dialogue. The issue that Gloria just brought up, I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge, and this is the conversation I've had both with Gloria as well as the other clerks. We have discussed this and we recognize, of course, there's a fiscal impact for running elections. And I am very committed to making sure that I continue to work with the counties and my colleagues here in the legislature to ensure that they have the resources that they need to carry out the responsibilities to increase access to voting options. For the handful of folks that raised that issue in testimony, of course, there is a fiscal impact, and that is something that we don't address in the policy committee. So for the public's edification, that is not something that's being swept under the rug. That's something that we have been working diligently with our county clerks to assess and make sure we provide them with the resources they need to do the wonderful job that they do. And we will continue to be committed to looking at that and making sure that whatever this body ultimately puts in the laps of our hard-working and great county clerks and registrars, that they have the tools that they need to do that job and continue to do the best of the best. So it is not lost on me that they are the face of elections in their counties, and that's why I reach out to them and make sure that we get their input, and we'll continue to do so and be responsible with making sure that we don't task them with something they don't have the tools to be able to accomplish. So with that, I again thank the committee for their attention and look forward to continue to work on the conceptual amendments that we discussed today, and would welcome again if there are proposals that would give some of my colleagues that have concern, less concern to the extent that it moves them. Let's talk, and I look forward to that conversation.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And with that, I will close the bill hearing on AB 321. Last on our agenda, we have public comment. So again, we ask that everyone broadcasting, please open up the line for public comment. Everyone will have up to 2 minutes, and we ask that you keep it to a topic or issue that's within the purview of this committee.
If you would like to make public comment, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 504, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Hello, my name is Brittany Sheehan, BrittanYSheehan, and my public comment is a request of Chairwoman Brittany Miller that she might consider to hear a bill in this committee on the governor's powers, and if we can have a discussion about these circumstances that we've been put under, and if we can actually have that for the public, I think that's very helpful, because we do want to see our legislators involved at some point. We're sort of wondering when this emergency ends and who gets to say when it ends and what the balance of powers are. So very much in the idea of our Constitution and a balance of powers, we want to engage the legislature at least to have the discussion. So I implore you to please hear that bill. Thank you.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 653, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good evening, Madam Chair Miller. This is Dora Martinez, DORA MARTINEZ, and I just want to say thank you for the committee and you and Speaker, I'm not even going to attempt to say his last name, for sitting and being patient and hearing all the comments. Just for the record, I tried to get on in support of AB 321, and I am still in support. People who are blind and cannot legally drive really welcome this mail-in ballot, because some of the paratransit are limited now due to the American Disability Act cut out of the transportation. So this is welcome, and thank you so very much. Take care and have a good evening.
Chair, the public comment line is open and working. However, we have no more callers in public comment at this time.
Well, thank you for that. First, I would just like to thank all the committee members for your diligence and attention to, what's been actually probably our longest hearing so far this session, but it's just pretty much what we can look forward to as we move forward. So thank you so much. Our next committee hearing will be Tuesday, April 6th at 4 p.m. We have nothing left on our agenda. So with that, this meeting is adjourned.